Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Wayne. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for being here. And Wayne mentioned this may be a somewhat unique or at least unusual event for the your historical society, and it's quite unusual for the New England Poetry Club as well, at least in recent years. Um, before I introduce the poets, I'll do them one at a time. I want to now introduce Denise Provo, who is one of the two co-presidents of the New England Poetry Club, and um, she'll do her introduction to the club.
Thanks very much, all of you, for being here, to the Historical Society for your hospitality and collaboration. And it sounds like David and Wayne have been the chief people to organize this evening of historical poetry of place. I'm Denise Provo. This is Doug Holder. We are co-presidents of New England Poetry Club, which also has a long history. We were founded in 1915 by a group of poets that included Amy Lowell, Robert Frost, Conrad Aiken, Catherine Lee Bates. Amy Lowell was our first president. This year is the 150th anniversary of her birth in Brookline to the illustrious Lowell family, who reportedly, according to the rhyme, only spoke to the Cabots, and the Cabots spoke only to God. In the Brahmin way. And we've got a lot of programming, special programming related to Amy Lowell. If you pick up one of these cards over on this table and scan the QR code, you will find all the programs. There's also the smaller business card for the Poetry Club, which gives the URL for the website, so you can access it that way if you don't do QR codes. And I think that the historic element will interest you. Two Lowell biographers and scholars are going to be doing a Zoom meeting later this month, 24th, which is going to be accessible even to non-members who register. And these are two very fine scholars who have fascinating things to say about Lowell's life. Carl Rollison just published a biography of Lowell, as did Melissa Bradshaw, who is in the process of editing Lowell's letters. So she was kind of a black sheep in her family, iconoclast, and a fascinating person to learn about. So you can get more information. I hope you enjoy tonight's reading, because we at the Poetry Club thinks there's something for everyone in poetry, and I'm sure there will be tonight. David, come tell us who's reading.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And thanks to, I see people at home on Zoom, so thank you too for being there. Give you a wave and you can smile back. Hi, folks. I see them. So we have four poets this evening who'll be reading for about 15 minutes apiece. I will introduce them one at a time, but just to give you their names now. Jessica Lucci, Gail Thomas, Owen Lewis, and Barbara de la Cuesta. So we'll begin with Jessica. Jessica Lucci is a poet, steampunk, and historical fiction author who writes about modern issues while maintaining historic integrity. She makes her home in Waltham, where she serves as president of the Waltham Arts Council. I'm sure many of you know that, and on the board of directors of the Waltham Museum and High Tech Waltham. She also helps organize fairs, that's with a R-E-S at the end, fairs, and festivals in Waltham, such as Waltham Pride and Kaleidoscope. She was the featured artist for her poetry at Watch City Arts this past May. Her haiku were included in an installation commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Minuteman Bikeway. More haiku have been installed in store windows in Arlington and Lexington. Her poetry was included in the Moody Street Art Walk in 2023. Her works include the steampunk novellas Waltham Watch and Salem Switch, the soon-to-be-published historical fiction novella, Triangle House, and the poetry collections, How Can I Steal a Purse and Graveyard Shift. So, Jessica.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Hello, everybody in Zoom land. It's good to see you too. So I am going to read to you tonight from my book, Graveyard Shift. And I wrote it mostly at Mount Feek Cemetery in Waltham, where I have a lot of my beloved dead buried, and other people who I know have their dead buried there too. And it's a place for me to go a reflection because it was the second designed garden cemetery in the United States. The first one was Mount Auburn Cemetery. So the one in Waltham, Mount Feek, is modeled after Mount Auburn Cemetery. And so it's meant to be a place of thoughtfulness and meditation and bird watching in my case. So this first poem I'm going to read to you is called My Loss, and it's in recognition that not all the losses we have in life are life and death. There are other kinds of losses as well. My loss. My loss is not contained in a tomb. No deep plot with fresh dry earth mounds over my sorrow's resting place. No stone marks the occasion of my grief. No flowers adorn my tragedy. Yet I sit here within the cemetery's gates, open for mourners, but not necessarily for me. I am an intruder here, without burial of my dead, without celebration, without life. Where else would I go with this ever-impending gloom that hides in the daytime beneath unnatural lights? Where else could I talk to about my dreadful woes, except for the spirits of other people's longing? And my next poem is special to me. It's a short one. And my grandfather built his house for his family. He was a bricklayer, and he built it in Waltham, and then the in-laws built their house behind them, and soon he had a whole neighborhood of houses that he had helped create. And his house and my grandparents' house was a place of joy. Well, after they died and the house was sold years later, I decided to drive by and see Grandma and Grandpa's old house and wonder who's living there. And when I turned the corner, I thought I must be on the wrong street because the house was gone. And not just that, there were two houses in its place. The backyard barbecue made out of brick, that was gone. All I could see was a little bit of rubble in the corner of the yard of brick. And so this is my poem called Albemarle Road. How does bone-like brick, unhinged from moss, survive? My rubble, but not in my memory. And so being sentimental, I was going through some of my grandparents' negatives and slides. If for those of you who don't know, back before we had digital cameras and smartphones, we had to use our 35mm camera, bring the film roll into a pharmacy or other Kodak place of some place where they could develop the film. And then you'd get back this little envelope with your photos in it and these slides. Well, I found this entire filing cabinet of slides and negatives. And so I was holding things up to the fluorescent lights, wondering who this was and who that was and what year it could have been. And to see photographs my father had taken while he was serving in the military. It was really interesting for me to get this behind the scenes look through negatives and slides. So this poem is called Negatives and slides. Bear witness to the blur of my forgotten memories, known only in brown strips, see-through, light and dark, juxtaposed, oppositional, backwards, as if time travel bends the physical around 360 degrees, curving and arching, swerving and breaking. No wonder why I can't remember. And so often in my meditations at Mount Peak Cemetery, in being a historical fiction writer and a steampunk author, I'm always noticing the names on the gravestones. And this one, Lucretia, I love that name. And that was the first time I had ever seen that name was on this gravestone. And it made me think about who Lucretia could have been. So this is called Gravedigger. Lucretia in the shade, never knowing how I was made to discover her flora 200 years later. Lucretia, I miss you so. And another thing I mentioned that I like at Mount Peak Cemetery is bird watching. It's on the Eastern Flyway for migration. And we know there's eagles, there's hawks, I've seen kingfishers there. I feel very lucky. So I've seen, apart from the birds, there's all kinds of wildlife. There are deer, there's turtles, there's everything you can think of. So one day I was there and it was an early spring and it was oddly quiet. There were no birds twittering around and trying to find mates and build homes. It was just still. And for a cemetery, that's actually quite odd. Where are the birds? Where are the birds? Blue yet stains the sky. All I see are words, tombstones on the fly. With cherub wings, an angel sings. Thunder rolls over fields of dead clover. Are the spirits on the wind, the souls undead that may have sinned too much to be welcomed into heaven, so they wallow with their brethren? Deep beyond the old iron gates, a visitor to come awaits the chance of meeting a Holy Ghost, yet unholy are they most. And so as far off church bells chime, while close by trains among hills climb, lightning strikes a hollow tree. No one cries out, not even me. Another thing that I enjoy at Mount Peak Cemetery is enjoying the seasons because we are in New England and at Mount Peak Cemetery, you have open lands, you have the water, you have the Charles River, you have little hills and burrows. So here's one version of autumn for me. It is called Autumn Is. Autumn is the smell of decay, the scent of manure mixed in with the hay. Autumn is the feel of defeat as another crab apple falls to my feet. This one is called Linger Longer because some of the statuaries can seem a little bit creepy at times. And so some of them are beautiful and joyful. Others are older and they were a little more into skulls and that kind of thing. So this is called Linger Longer. Chipped black gates, marble gardens, welcome me where time waits. My Waltham watch, unnecessary here. Unneedful things are life and breath when I have cherubs inviting me to stay, linger longer. And this one is about Frida Kahlo, who was a Mexican artist. And she was disabled. She had a terrible accident when she was a young woman. And throughout most of her adult life, she had to lay in her bed and she would paint. And she would paint like Michelangelo on a special easel that she had created. So I saw her art display at the Rose Art Museum, which is at Brandeis University. And it's a wonderful museum that has rotating exhibits. And I wrote an acrostic poem, which means a poem about painting. And I even painted my own Frida Kahlo based on what I saw. So this is my poem, inspired by Frida Kahlo's portraits at the Rose Art Museum. Beaded, jangling, rose-topped, a queen, a gypsy, a garden. Fractured bones didn't break her. Technology didn't take her away from herself, hiding behind monkeys, flora and fauna, embracing her, replacing her, convicting her soul until she was a new being. Bedridden, ingenuity created her new life without dance, but not without the music she conveyed, coming across the corner, lifted high up upon her throne, her studio, her deathbed. Ambiguity, androgyny, aloft, indentured to pain, her art. And the last one is going to be extra lucky for you because I'm going to sing. So in my family, I'm not allowed to sing. So you're in for a real treat. So this song is made me think about all the art that we see throughout Waltham. We see graffiti art, we see people tagging their names, and some of the art is almost like, to me, Kilroy was here. It's a generation marking a territory to let other people know we were here and it's okay to be here. So this made me think about, what if we didn't have Kilroy was here? What if we didn't have people messaging each other? What if the art was gone and the messages were gone? So this is called The Hero Often, and it's in honor of Gordon Lightfoot. Yet the spirit of losing you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yet the thought of losing you, your spirit, imagined you to death, brings runny-nosed tears to my eyes. I don't know where we went wrong, but the feeling's gone and I just can't get it back. I know exactly where we went wrong when I laughed at your outrage and scoffed at sentimentality. I see you painted across the city and always cry out your name and shake my head and damn you for being you. And that's where I'll end tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Well, from the brief sample that you gave us, I can't imagine what your family's issue is with. I mean, it's very nice. Yeah. But you know, families, I mean, yeah. So, oh, and you may have noticed coming in, but I will now point out so I don't forget later. Everyone has, all poets have their books at the back, and are certainly available if you're interested in buying any copies, and also to sign them for you. So, next is Gail Thomas. Gail Thomas's books are Trail of Roots, Leaving Paradise, Odd Mercy, Waving Back, No Simple Wilderness, and Finding the Bear. Her poems have been widely published in journals and anthologies, including Calyx, Valparaiso Poetry Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, North American Review, Cumberland River Review, and Mezzo Camin. Among her awards are the Seven Kitchens Press Award for Trail of Roots, the Charlotte Mew Prize from Headmistress Press for Odd Mercy, the Narrative Poetry Prize from Naugatuck River Review, and the Massachusetts Center for the Books Must Read for Waving Back. She's been a fellow at the MacDowell Colony and U Cross, and several poems have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize. She teaches poetry with Pioneer Valley Writers Workshops, visits schools and libraries with her therapy dog, Sunny, and works with immigrant and refugee communities in Western Massachusetts. Gail.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for coming and for inviting me to read today. I'm very happy to be here. I am from Western Mass, and the book that I'm going to read from tonight is called No Simple Wilderness, an elegy for Swift River Valley. This book came together because I lived at the edge of the Quabbin Reservoir for many years. And there are 50 different hiking trails that one can access there. And I think I've hiked at just about every trail. But what really interested me every time I was hiking at the Quabbin was the history of the reservoir. And I was very fortunate to, I was teaching writing workshops at a lot of senior centers and hospitals in Western Mass. And I started to meet many older men and women who call themselves survivors of the Swift River Valley. And I was able to interview quite a few of them in order to make sure that the book was authentic. And so interspersed with the poems that I'm going to read, I will choose some of the quotes from the people that I met. And just to refresh your memory and orient you, more than 3,500 people were displaced from the Swift River Valley in Western Massachusetts, and a way of life changed when the Quabbin Reservoir was built to supply water for Boston. In 1927, the Metropolitan Water Board began construction of the reservoir project, and in 1938, 4 towns and 7 villages were officially terminated. Hailed as an engineering and public works feat, the reservoir is the 3rd largest body of fresh water in New England, and the 85,000-acre wilderness area was created and is known for the successful bald eagle restoration project, which is why I called my book No Simple Wilderness. Yes, it's a wilderness. The story is not simple. There was much tragedy and poverty in Western Mass during the 20s and 30s. The wonder of this is to be able to walk there. Maybe some of you have hiked there or fished there. But the Eagle Restoration Project is a major success. And we who live along the Connecticut River, we see bald eagles all the time, even above my yard. So that's really wonderful. So I'm going to read poems and some of the voices from the people I interviewed. And I'm just going to read straight through them without comment so that you get a feeling of the places. Start with hiker. For solitude, walk here. If you are patient, you will be rewarded by fox, turkey, coyote, deer. Grouse may startle up from brush, raccoon or porcupine peer down from a limb. Near water, follow osprey, scanning for fish. Eagles riding the thermals, loons reappearing after long dives. Trails lead past lush beds of fern, flickering in every shade of green, to dams knit by beavers, exquisite in their knowledge of where a meadow is needed. You may never see another human all day. If you listen to wind comb the forest, trees creaking like floorboards, you may suddenly be gripped by old sorrows and not know why. The names. Find an old map. Dana, Enfield, Prescott, Greenwich. Look harder for the villages. Storesville, Millington, Doubleday Village, Cooleyville, Nichawag, Atkinson Hollow, Packardville, Smith Village, Bobbin Hollow, Puppyville, North Dana. The train named Rabbit Run stopped everywhere as it looped past orchards, grain mills, harness shops, cider mills, barns, grist mills, charcoal kiln, soapstone quarry, textile mills, factories that made bonnets, bobbins, boxes, billiard tables, dance halls, hotels, racetrack, churches, fire departments, camps, town halls, garages, post offices, stores, schools, and cemeteries. Years of rumors, hard times, reduced the population, but no one believed complete absence would ring so loudly when the names were spoken. This poem is to honor the native peoples who lived in the Swift River Valley. Song of the Nipmuc. When a deer is killed, its spirit is praised in the eating. When a trout is speared, its spirit is praised in the drying. When a rock is moved to plow a field, its spirit loses its way. When a bush cannot bear fruit, its spirit weeps. When a tree is cut and burned, its spirit is wounded. When flowing water is dammed, its spirit chokes. When shelter is destroyed, its spirit is rootless. When a grave is disturbed, its spirit is dishonored. When earth is changed beyond sight, its spirit is deceived. Water. Small waves lap the shore, curving script of a dry summer, written on sand and small imported stones. Driftwood spread like silver teeth, yanked from prehistory, when a glacier scooped this valley, leaving high hills its destiny. Nipmuc called it Haben, meeting of the waters, but the names of the waters were not saved. When land was turned into farms, villages, the waters became Swift River, Beaver Brook, Ware River, Fever Brook. Power for mills came from rivers, and summer people built camps on ponds. Pottapog sunk, Neesaponset. Later came a faraway thirst. Earthen dams made from the valley rest on caissons, cemented to bedrock. Swift River began inching over the land, reversing the flow. 7 years later, the bowl was filled. Each day, 300 million gallons surged through tunnels laid by men who needed work. Each day, when Boston taps are turned, water pours out, innocent, clean. And this is Harry Spencer. It hit my folks and my grandparents the hardest. We young people, why, we couldn't wait to get out of this valley. We saw it as progress. Lake trout. Trophy size, this fish is called a success, feeding on smelt, breeding in sandy shallows, self-sustaining. At first, soil from the plain clogged the bottom. Roots and leaves grabbed for oxygen. Now, rubble and stone, free of life, the deep cold water offers its breath. Diving down to the silent center, trout glide over the grave of Greenwich with open eyes. Earl Gardner. All the local people laughed at the woodpeckers. They were the men from South Boston who came out to the country. They didn't know the first thing about cutting down a tree. Laborers. The first call went out and lasted for 11 years. Hard labor for men willing to drill and blast through bedrock, to work underground in rubber suits, to load muck onto switch cars, water leaking from rock seams, coating eyes and mouth, thick grit, mud spewing from the wounds. After tunnels, an engineering miracle of concrete, compression, chambers, pumps, reinforced steel, and underneath it all, the digging, hauling sand, silt, mud, mimicry of beavers becomes Windsor Dam, Goodenough Dike. How many valley men fed their children with bulldozing, moving graves, burning trees, the smell of labor sending its message for miles on good country air. The graves. After the sales, after the closings, after the moving, before the dynamite, before the tree cutting, before the bulldozing, was the digging up of graves, the moving of stones, the bagging of remains, the sending of letters to families asking them to choose new plots. Some chose Quabbin Park, some scattered to other towns. Some couldn't manage one more thing. Some bundles of dirt and bone never matched the names scratched on fieldstone. Bald eagle. A sighting is what we long for when January wind slices across the ice. Long wings spread straight as a knife, white head lowered, eyes hungry for movement. Along the shore, sweep of feathers sounds like forgiveness. What was almost lost nests here, sins redeemed in the counting. Althea Raymond. We picked pails and pails of blueberries to sell. Once I put a note in the bottom of a quart basket to tell whoever bought them that it was me, Althea, who did the picking. I got a letter back from a Negro cook at a hotel in Boston. She told me that she had a little girl named Althea too. It made me feel like I had been somewhere. Photographs. They were taken of vacant farmhouses, numbered cards nailed to a post in the dooryard to keep track of what would be lost. And later, sites could be mistaken for what would happen soon in Europe. Bridges dynamited, brush burned, piles of rubble where villages had been. Boys who had never left this valley landed on another continent, ready for adventure. Some came back changed, as only war can change a boy, to find all that was familiar gone. Some moved into new houses, tripping in the dark where a door should have been. Photographs packed away until someone asks where home was. Rebecca Norton. The day before Enfield Church was to be torn down, there was a mysterious fire. People had their ideas about how it started, but no one really knew. Only the silver communion set was saved. It's in the museum. And she's referring to the Swift River Valley Historical Museum, which is a wonderful museum if you're ever out in Western Mass. And that's where this poem was written. The artifacts. The ordinary cataloged, haunted by the ghost of lips that sipped from a cider brandy bottle, still wrapped in a brown paper bag, teeth that scraped two tined forks, feet inside tiny wedding slippers, fingers that tatted human hair, folded paper fans, smoothed axe handles, lap organ and fiddle, Civil War drum, guns, swords, saws, honey extractor, cream separator, top hat and calling cards, camera, doctor's kit, palm leaf hats, and Fanny Eaton's sewing machine, Dana's fire truck, Gilman's oil paintings, the Goodnoe triplets' cradle, molds from Millington Brick Factory, Lily Coolidge's stuffed parrot, Ned, bridal gowns from the triple wedding, padlocked mitts from Prescott Poor Farm, the Indian dugout canoe found at the bottom of Morton Pond that causes museum visitors to argue about how the gouges were made and whether it is authentic. And I'll close with this poem. Throughout this book, I've also scattered some poems about myself and my experience at the Quabbin. And I come from an immigrant family as well. So this idea of dislocation, of having your homeland disappear is very close to my heart too. Wild grapes. Unexpected sweetness stops my walk, and I become a dog triggered by scent to find, hidden under a canopy of leaves, wild grapes on tangled vines. Hidden heavy clusters hang like amethysts on this forgotten road. Dusky purple and rose globes, some black, shriveled, tug at a yearning deep in my belly like lust that leads to terraced hillsides, that turns away from this trail to dreams of Umbria, blue sky, sun on stucco, figs drying, willow baskets spilling over with warm fruit. Imagine a table in the shade of olives, spread with bright linen, bread and cheese. I pluck un grappolo, dark juice drips a trail to the village my grandmother never remembered. The long road home, the harvest of generations who leave and never return. I spit out the nub of seed, like the childhood prayer I stopped saying, fruit of thy womb. Mystery to girls thirsty for Chianti mixed with soda. Altar wine became one mystery of blood unsolved. Priests' magic hidden with a flourish behind white napkins, purple stains, a road of faith I couldn't travel. Communion comes now, on a trail in this wilderness, created to satisfy another thirst, a trail haunted by lost pastures, churches, grange halls. I'm startled by a rush of wings, then look up, a bald eagle hovers close, hunter's head and cold appraising eye, then a cry from its mate hidden by pines. Over the wide water, I watch them leave. Thank you so much.
You, Gail. I was reminded while you were reading of, I don't know if anybody else can remember this. It was a TV, public television special quite a number of years ago. Could have been 20 years ago. I think it's called Under Quabbin. Yeah, do you know that? And yeah,
It's older than that.
it's older than that. Yeah, yeah. Of what some did anybody actually go? Was it just cameras that were sunk under the water? I don't remember. But in any case, it's underwater footage of things like portions of walls and remnants of these four towns and their villages. It's quite impressive. Under Quabbin. Next, we have Owen Lewis. Excuse me. Owen Lewis is the author of 3 collections of poetry and 3 chapbooks. Most recently, Knock, knock. Field Light was a distinguished favorite, the 2020 NYC Big Book Award, and a 2021 must read from the Mass Book Awards. Best Man was the recipient of the Jean Pedrick Chapbook Prize of the New England Poetry Club. Oh, good for us. Okay, we did that. That was before me, before I got involved. Recent prizes include the 2023 Guernsey International Poetry Prize and the 2023 Rumi Prize for Poetry / Arts and Letters. He is also recipient of the International Hippocrates Society Prize for Poetry and Medicine. At Columbia University, he is professor of psychiatry in the Department of Medical Humanities and Ethics and teaches narrative medicine. So, Owen, please.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the New England Poetry Club for making this event happen. Although this is not my most recent book, I'm very happy to be reading from it because it came out in 2020, and so many things were canceled. It was launched at Chesterwood, the home of Daniel Chester French, and I'll tell you a little bit about the genesis of this book. 35 years ago, bought a house. I'm from Western Mass, a little more west than Gail, in Stockbridge. Bought a small house that was the house renovated by Daniel Chester French, who, if you don't know him, sculptor of the Minuteman and most importantly, the Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial. And so he bought this little house for his daughter, renovated it as a wedding present. And as you can see, you'll be able to see it more closely. This picture is from 1922 on the back porch of the house, and I will introduce these people to you. But the kind of the way the book came about, when 35 years ago, when we bought the house, I had 3 kids running around, was a lot of things going on. So I hardly noticed the history of the house or really the history of the area. And bit by bit, I absorbed it. But at a certain point, the house empties, like turns around a bit. And I'm sitting on this back porch with this archival picture. I had a number of them and began to wonder who these people were, listening to them and beginning to connect to history in a different way. And it led me to think about what does it mean for a poet to write history? I think Gail's book is amazing because we hear that, and I think no one here will forget the history of the Quabbin Reservoir after a poet has a hand in writing the history. And so I began to think about, how do you receive history? How do we know history? And how does it come to us? In the back on the table, I've run off a number of copies of an essay that I wrote during and after I wrote this book on poets writing history. So feel free to take a copy of that. The book is meant to be read continuously. There aren't titles as much as indicators of where and when the poem is taking place. 2018, Glendale Crossing. Dusk, a freight train crossing the road, out of the dusk, back into dust. Once out of the east and into the west, along the Lea, in Worcester, it won't reach Pittsfield until long after dark, and won't take him where he needs to go. A lone driver stopped in his auto. A flickering of metal and the low sun behind him spotlights the lines car by car. Providence, Worcester, Boston, Albany, New York Central, Providence. Against the deepening sky, he sees the horizon pulled by the train. Its pulsing click-clack, rusty wheels, the strained axles singing of tonnage. The train men know this crossing, its lights and switches, the couplings and uncouplings, maze of tracks, maze of mistakes, stalled, the flashing arm before him, he's held up by the train and held in place. This place, how long he doesn't know. Before him, it's signaling bells, endless bells, not chimes, not carillons, bells. And the back porch becomes central. That's, in a way, my meeting place with history, and it's neither outside nor inside. From a corner of the porch are cricket solos, the gaining dusk, a distant chorale, these oboes of summer's end, the August heat hold, the air lays over like muslin, binding breath. These insect instruments unstitch dusk's mauve cover, and through the rent a cooler cirrus stirring, a wordless filling, the long benediction of claret light, by whose offering the star dipper brimmed, and wider yet the afterglow. Soft reeds, the chirping slows, the moon scythe, the scalpel cut through darkening air. And there's some sections that are quasi-prose. This one is porch photo, the Dormouse. It's the name of the house. Dog days of August, the back porch lulls, house drifting. Dr. Lewis spends the month alone, a sort of sabbatical. He should be used to this unfamilied state by now, but he's not. No visitors, not one. His only companions, an old photograph. He studies it just beside his wide wicker easy chair, a photograph of a prior owner with her guests. Picture acquired years ago for a touch of local history, now warped by the outdoor humidity. They posed for the photo as a familiar group on the same back porch. A late summer day, 1922, they sit around a rough farm table. Peggy Cresson, daughter of Daniel Chester French, sculptor of public monuments, of the Lincoln Memorial, the Minuteman, she's a sculptor in her own right, sits on her own back porch called Il Terrazzo, so named for her wedding last year in Taormina. Her visitors, Mrs. Hilda Beecher Stowe, granddaughter-in-law of the late Harriet Beecher Stowe, and her sister, Miss Gertrude Robinson Smith. At the end of the small table, William Penn Cresson, much older husband of Peggy. The photograph is attributed to Dr. Walter Lambert, country physician. He too remains outside of the photo. Had he retired? They have been here all along on this porch. In this house, originally 2 rooms up, 2 rooms down, one time a tenant farmers whose sons found work in a Housatonic paper mill a mile away. Across and down the road, a 5 minutes walk, parents' summer cottage, 20 rooms. This small house renovated for the couple as a wedding gift by a doting father. Father and daughter planned together, and from one letter to the next, the dormer house became the dormouse. Lewis studies the photo, a moment century old, in the very place he now sits. A town full of history, and he's not part of it, not even part of his own history. He tries to squeeze into that summer of 22. Now, I should say that one thing that happens, part of the history of this area is also an artistic history. And this book is called Field Light because the field behind my house is actually contiguous with the field that Daniel Chester French would look out at. And in the other direction, the field that Norman Rockwell would sit at, riding his bicycle up from town. And so the field light begins to serve as a kind of inspiration. Now, this poem mentions Adam. Adam is a fictional character who's a caretaker, who's part Native American, part African American, and in this fiction descended from the president's Adams. So he's an amalgam of, he's everything, so to speak. The obvious, not so obvious, in the midst of the day, full of drifting mist, overcast, I'm drawn to the field again, the day before or after, a day's time before and after. Deer trail crossing the far end, scatter of wild turkey feathers, nightly passage, a rushed flight, as if the sudden flapping lingers in the stealth of a coyote ambush. Almost extinct, a dozen-fold flock hovers just at the field edge. Has Adam summoned them? At wood edge, an old pine, a trunk long lightning rip, still open, still bleeding sap. From a storm decades ago, I touched the tree wound, and my storm this decade. On my fingers, the scent, the stickiness carries forward. No seams buzzing about my head, ears, eyes. What do these little gnats see in my eyes? The limits, the craning stretch of a personal life. See more, look, buzzing, looking further afield, more light than a pair of human eyes can see. They lend their 1,000 prismatic orbits. This poem, dated 2018 in 1781, draws on a bit of both history and folklore of the area. I always say, cover the weeping bruise, apply ointment and a bandage. Adam says, show the bruise to air and sun and rain. Air's the best salve. Adam says, show the wound, let it tell. Words in the air bring light. Words in the air bring freedom. To bruise and wound, to break and burn, eyes burn red, and breath gasp the mangle of injury if wind can carry the word. Which wounds to cover, which expose. The wound becomes the hero. Long ago, Adam's Auntie Mumbit, great-great-grandmother of W.E.B. Du Bois, born into slavery 1744 in Claverick, New York, Peter Hogboom's farm at age 7, given to his daughter Hannah on her marriage to John Ashley, and was moved to Sheffield, Massachusetts. She married, had a child, little Bet. Her husband did not return from the Revolutionary War. Vile temper, Mistress Hannah one day aimed to strike little Bet with a hot shovel. Mumbit interposed, took the shovel blow to her arm. All winter, the wound festered and oozed, and she refused to cover it up. Ask what had happened, she'd reply. Ask the missus. She'd heard the newly ratified state constitution read in public in the Sheffield Commons, insisted, I ain't no dumb critter. Won't the law give me my freedom? Found her way to a young lawyer, Theodore Sedgwick, in nearby Stockbridge. With another slave of the Ashleys, Sedgwick argued her case for freedom. Brom and Bett versus Ashley, heard before the County Court of Common Pleas in Great Barrington in August 1781. The jury ruled in Bett's favor, and after slavery banned in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and she had her freedom. From the French's Summer Studio, 2018, 1929. A view of a field like mine, once crop, now vista. French walked the studio porch. How much of his light could his mind hold? He carried the light of these acres with him, sculpting his Lincoln. Each day he'd wheel the model out the studio side, outside. Even now, he wanted to see his Lincoln outdoors again, couldn't let the statue rest. Shadows worked like another set of hands, changing the face. Who is this Lincoln? The dedication, already 7 years old, he remembered sketching, sculpting, resculpting. His hands were thinking, to hammer emancipation into stone, to etch light into the nation's memory and future. Lincoln's right hand is open, the left clenched, one foot ready to stride forward, the other hesitant in the next step he will take. Light from his marble eyes filled the studio. Where would it carry his words and deeds? The sculpture often hovered above the sculpture often hovered above itself. He knew the marble's flaws, but the man's. Back in the studio, in the waning light, he regarded another statue which would be his last rendering, Andromeda, stone smooth as skin. Was it love chained to a craggy rock, or the guilty myth of a parent's error bound into his child? He watched Peggy, watching the nation honor him, her sculpting many successes, but Andromeda's chains were thick and heavy. I imagine his nightmare. A vandal chisels through the chains that hold her. She disappears into the sky of many stars. And where does the statue go that was made just down the road from me? The National Mall, Washington, D.C. On the mall in front of the monument where Daniel Chester French's Lincoln sits, 1922, Memorial Day, dedication of the monument, 50,000 attend. 1925, Ku Klux Klan rally, 40,000. 1939, Marian Anderson, barred by the DAR from the National Cathedral, 50,000 in a nationwide broadcast. 1945, Nazi genocide, 400 rabbis. 1959, MLK, give us the ballot, 25,000. 1963, MLK, I have a dream, 250,000. 1969, national mobilization to end the war in Vietnam, 600,000. 1978, longest walk Native American trek, 30,000 miles from San Francisco across the country. 1989, March for Women's Rights, 500,000. 1993, LGB Rights and Liberty, 800,000. 1995, Million Man March, almost a million. 2004, March for Women's Lives, 1,100,000. 2010, March for America, Immigration Reform, 200,000. 2017, Women's March Against Trump, 1,500,000. And in conclusion, from the Lincoln's first inaugural address, Monday, March 4th, 1861. We must not be enemies. All over this broad land will yet swell the chorus by the better angels of our nature. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Owen. Well, I'm at last happy to introduce Barbara de la Cuesta. I wanted, some of you know this, but perhaps most of you don't. It was really, this program is actually really Barbara's initiative. We were in touch, you reached me by email, oh gee, last summer or something. I mean, it was quite some time back. And to wrap up the story, we're really here, I mean, really on Barbara's initiative, and made the contact with Wayne and the Historical Society. And so, I mean, really special thanks. So let me introduce her. Barbara de la Cuesta taught and worked as a journalist in South America, and is now a teacher of English as a second language and Spanish. Out of this experience came her two prize-winning novels, The Spanish Teacher, winner of the Gival Press Award in 2007, and Rosa, winner of the Driftless Novella Prize from Brain Mill Press in 2017. Brain Mill Press, that's great. She has also published two collections of poetry with Finishing Line Press, as well as two novels, The Mists and Henrietta Rose. Her collection of short stories, The Place Where Judas Lost His Boots, has recently won the Bright Horse Prize for short fiction. And tonight we'll be getting a focus on her book, Adam's Chair, a novella in verse, a peek into the city of Waltham, past, present, and possibly future. So, Barbara.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for bringing this to fruition. I really love this city. It's the first time in my life I lived in a city. I grew up in the suburbs, and I just loved living here. I was an activity director up at Larchwood Lodge, and at night I came on my bicycle down to the library and taught English as a second language. And there I met the immigrants of the day. But when I went back to my day job, I met the immigrants of the past. So, and there happened to be a project in Waltham back then, sponsored by the News Tribune and Brandeis. Does anyone remember that? And they brought out a book of photographs. And one of my favorite old mill workers at Larchwood Lodge, an Italian from Sicily. One day, people whispered outside his door, they're interviewing him for a book. So I was immediately interested. And I got myself on the committee to interview people. And that was my interviewee was a French Canadian who was clutching a blanket that she had woven herself from sheep on her family farm in French Canada. And she said every time she was sent, because they couldn't feed all the children on the farm, she was sent here to work at the mill. And every time they'd go back in the summer to the farm, they would hope they'd be asked to stay, but there wasn't enough food, so she had to come back to Waltham. But no one remembers that book. Oh dear. Okay. This is a hybrid book, partly in prose, partly in poetry. And it's one day in Waltham. And starting with that project, I was interested immediately in the history of this place, and it's fascinating. So I start back with the colonies. This is a quote from Governor Winthrop. The governor and some company with him went up by Charles River above Watertown and named the first brook Beaver Brook, because beavers had shorn down divers dams across the north side, being a fair stream and coming from a pond a mile below the river. Thence to a great rock upon which stood a high stone cleft in sunder, that men might go through, which they called Adam's chair. And so we opened on April 13th, 1981. And the shuttle, Columbia, was in its second day. And a couple cancellations made its launch date the same as Yuri Gagarin in his historic flight in Vostok. The late Armand O'Coin, 6 a.m., an Alcid Arsenal at 508 Napoleon Court has found his walk aid hidden behind the boiler, escaped his wife Eulalie, heavily asleep, and makes his way downtown by way of Bank Street, seeing ghosts. Past the Irish Travel Bureau, the Old Hall's Corner smoke shop, loving furnishings for men, Ike Allen's Corinthian alleys, in the basement under the Waldorf Lunch on Gordon Street, and the old embassy, a walkway back then. Its ceiling gave an illusion of a starry night, a starry sky, Alcid recalls, with floating clouds. A rather taking thing. L. Leslie Cahill played the organ. Reading from Euripides, the lecture room at Spingold runs round the electric sign on the Waltham Savings. The wonders of the modern world, thinks Alcid. But give him any day the starry sky at the old embassy, billiards at Ike Allen, trolley trips to Norumbega, the French-American Athletic and Literary Association that met on the second floor of the Odd Velvet. He scatters a crowd of grackles, sparrows, crosses the tracks below the car wash, Used to be a school here. Made Americans out of you. Combated Bolshevism and lawlessness in the foreign-born. Yes, Alcid sees it now. His memory a lucid pool. The creamy walls, projected stereoptic and ghosts, Lewis and Clark on shores of the Mississippi. The terrible Miss Barnum, who would make Eulalie leave the Monday wash to write her essay, Why I Want to Be a Citizen. She took them berry picking, wouldn't let the girls mix with the dirty boys. She thought she'd hold that tide back till the war undid her. Yes, married, most of them, a half-breed in the oven by the second front. Jean-Pierre, tranquille, and he, soon after, to the prim Eulalie. A mist rising makes a mystery of the old watch factory across the river. The watch. He follows the workers in a city van and enters Mount Freak Cemetery. I thought it was so interesting that Jennifer's poems took place in Mount Peak Cemetery. Pressing under a giant silver beech that guards the entrance. A. Alcid Arsenault, E. L. Eulalie Langille, carved in its trunk in 1933, has grown into the upper boughs this day in 1981. And here we hear from the shuttle. 170 miles above the earth, the shuttle Columbia passes over gypsum sands, the Tularosa Basin. Forbidden, says a sign. Bicycles, roller skates, picnics, plastic flowers between April and October. Well, he isn't about to come on roller skates. Now, what I did in Mount Peak Cemetery was picnic, and I also came on a bicycle. A mighty crash of a cook apron, drum roll of trash can, the streetlights pale, and to the east, the curtain lifts from Boston Harbor along the river west to Cambridge, Watertown, Waltham. The graves begin with the small markers with a military dead. Here, Corporal Dennis Ryan received a musket ball in his leg and died in 1887. And up the hill, the Yankee fathers, Isaac Watts, the Roberts family, mother, father, child dead at 14 months. They had a paper mill, the Roberts family, where Brandeis is today, and are gathered within a spiky iron fence to keep the rabble out. Here, Nathaniel Weeder, engineer, and wife Rebecca, we will meet in heaven. He climbs the grassy slope to the railroad trestle, where the outdoor sleepers, then upward to a Swedish neighborhood. They came to work at the watch factory. Isaacson, Borg, Helsingius, Oscar, they called him Snowball, kept to themselves and had their chapel there on River Street. Always had the best jobs at the watch. Eulalie caught her hair once in a machine they had for buffing pinions, and it was Snowball rescued her, freed her, scolded, comforted. Higher still, Italians with their angels and Madonnas, they worked at the mill. Sicilians, stones here are crisply chiseled, shining, unlike the older ones below, softened by rain. He moves among his own now, at the furthest end. It didn't even look like a cemetery there, but like some new raw housing development. Like the new rich, the new dead disturb the new neighborhood. Arcadians, La Baie, La Brune, La Guille, the Grand Dérangement, the families of 10, 12 children separated, sent to separate towns, the fathers wandering, seeking, crazed, lost children. Here's the place, a pile of red earth, the workers buried to their waists. The late Armand O'Coy, a cousin twice removed, lies beside his own plot and Eulalie's. Alcid pays respect to both and to the new, and stumps back down the hill with walk aid. He didn't come on roller skates. Young and Crippen sleep. Some of the almost 40,000 tiles on the spaceship are missing, but it shouldn't present a problem, say the experts. So that's before dawn. And I put it first because the neighborhoods in Mount Peak, I don't know if you've ever noticed, are like the neighborhoods in Waltham, or at least the way they used to be. Yeah. So the next person to get up is Priscilla, who is a home health aide. Priscilla, cycling to work in milky dawn. St. Mary's rich red brick, hummocky lawn, already green from late March snow. They're raising a fire-gutted house on Water Street. She wonders what they'll put up in its place and if they'll do it before summer. She stops to buy a Western egg at Alexander's Waltham House of Pizza, eats it standing by her bike and watching welfare mothers climb the stairs to number 22, get at their social workers early. Tampon lying in the gutter. Unlovely artifacts of our age, she thinks. The Charles River rushes below the old Waltham cotton and wool works. It's elder housing now, and artist studios. Enoch Rowan, her great uncle, sold the property to Francis Cabot Lowell, another distant relative, who introduced the power loom and built the great mill on Elm Street. Rowans moved to Watertown, did well in snuff and mattress ticking, built the large house on Auburn Street. She remembers Christmas long ago, dressed up in velveteen. A little late, but still she makes the detour to the mill to take the footbridge across the river. Her river, she called it. But it's not your river, Frosty, her son, remonstrates. You always say that everything is yours. It is, she says. insisting, I claim it. No one else does. Well, if it were mine, I'd keep it cleaner. He, working on it, she. I have a lot of people working on it. Her committee, dragging rusty supermarket carts and other unmentionable objects out of it. But she was the first to claim it. Frosty is relentless, his mother's son. He brings up Mount Peak Cemetery where they picnic. Ducks at Roberts, the red line, and the blue. You always talk as if you own them. Well, I do. She carries the joke to ever grander heights of hyperbole. Back in those heady days, she asked for the divorce and freed the four of them from 8-room house, 2 Volvos, lawn, 2 dogs. They owned the red line and the blue. Futuristic bullets streaking through the tiled corridor to Wonderland. They never took it there, but to Aquarium and up the creaky escalator to the Bay State liners. Edward Rowe Snow, gently rocking, waiting, hers. She claimed it too. And also the harbor and one island, hers. Well, you ought to keep it all cleaner, Frosty says. Well, she has been working on it. Such a responsibility. It was necessary to divide nature walk at 10 and 3, all free. And coming back from Pedex, they would make for her restroom at the Marriott, wash up in marble splendor. She kept the washroom, but couldn't be bothered keeping all of it, she told Grant Frosty. Her empire. Frosty understood for all the joking. His sister solely didn't. She thought that Priscilla's empire wasn't worth the losses. And I'll stop there. That's the way into the book. And just mention why I wrote it in prose and in poetry. Many of the people here were street people in 1981. They were released from Metropolitan State, and some of them are characters, and they all had they were harmless. They all had a room with a hot plate on one of the boarding houses or on Myrtle Street, and they were the ones who spoke poetry for some reason. Al said that he was a little demented and he's totally living in the past. He spoke poetry. But when it came to Priscilla, she spoke prose. She was a busy woman. She had 3 children and a job, and she had rejected her Yankee family totally. She protested the opening of the power plant. She was a socialist. So she spoke prose. Then there were 2 street people I mentioned they were benign, totally harmless, but they were still living in some sort of dreams. One of them, and I'm going to give a free book if anyone remembers The Kisser. No. Well, the kisser kissed you if you weren't careful. He kissed me twice. No one remembers the kisser. Okay. Does anyone remember the cat lady who had a cat in a supermarket cart? And she came to the coffee. I used to sing in the choir at the Congregational Church. And she came to the coffee hour once with the cat. And we weren't very Christian in acknowledging her there. So no one remembers the cat lady. No, okay. This is a Waltham that only I remember. This, yes, yeah, yeah. I thought you'd have that. Yeah. So I found that when I had the cat woman she used to go to yard sales and fill up her cart. And then the cat would come and jump on top of all these things. And then she'd go home and scold him for having left her for a period of time. And she speaks poetry. Do I have time to read a little bit of her? It's getting quite late. So anyway, that's I think that's how hybrid writing is coming about. And most of us speak prose. And I thank you all again.